I used to believe that the hardest thing about aging was watching your body slow down. I was wrong. The hardest thing is realizing your own blood has been studying you long enough to learn how to take everything you built. Before we continue, make sure to hit the like button. Also, tell us in the comments, what time is it where you are right now and which city are you watching from? I love seeing how far our stories travel. The call came on an ordinary Tuesday morning. My foreman, Rick, said the supplier's account had been switched. New signatures, new authorization codes. Your son told us you wanted him handling approvals from now on, Rick said, casual, as if he was mentioning a weather update. I laughed at first. It wasn't a funny laugh, more like the kind you make when the world shifts half an inch and you hope no one else noticed. That so? I asked. Yeah, Rick continued. Said it was part of the transition plan. Transition plan. Two words that sat in my gut like wet concrete. I'd founded Owens & Sons Construction 43 years ago, back when the office was a storage shed with a coffee pot that only brewed bitterness. The business had been my proof that honest labor could build a life. Now apparently it had a transition plan no one told me about. That evening I drove to the office, a 2-story brick building on the east side of Cincinnati, the one I'd designed myself. The parking lot was full, but my reserved space had a new sign bolted into the asphalt. Evan Owens, President. My son's name. I sat in the truck for a full minute before turning off the engine. The dashboard light cast everything in a dim orange glow, like the color of dying embers. I tried to remember when I'd last talked to Evan about leadership, about the day he'd eventually take over. Maybe 5 years ago, maybe more. Back then it had sounded distant, hypothetical, something we'd ease into together. Inside, the reception area smelled of new paint. The company logo, a steel beam forming an O, had been updated. Sharper lines, darker colors, younger, flashier. My name was still there, but smaller, tucked beneath the new slogan, Building Tomorrow. Evan came out of the conference room, sleeves rolled, tie loosened. Dad, you're here late. He smiled the way people do when they're trying to look relaxed, but their eyes keep checking exits. Just stopped by to sign a few things, I said. Rick mentioned you're handling supplier approvals now. He hesitated half a beat. Yeah, trying to streamline stuff. You've earned a break. A break, I repeated. Come on, you've been at this 40 years. Thought we could ease you out of the day-to-day, let you enjoy yourself. Ease me out. I nodded slowly, watching him as he talked about efficiency, new systems, modernization. Phrases that sounded suspiciously like a polite coup. When he finished, I just said, Sounds like you've got big plans. He grinned, relieved, maybe thinking I was proud. You'll see. It's gonna be great. I left without signing anything. Back home, the house felt too quiet. My wife had passed 3 winters ago, leaving her warmth embedded in every photograph and the faint lavender scent still clinging to the curtains. I poured a drink I didn't want and opened the company's online registry. Password still worked, for now. The digital paperwork confirmed what my gut already knew. New filings, new titles. Evan listed as acting president. My role changed to founder, emeritus. That word, emeritus, burned more than any insult. It meant retired without consent. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. My first instinct was to call him, demand explanations, but decades of negotiation in construction had taught me that information is worth more than anger. I needed to know how deep this ran before I said a word. The next morning, I visited our accountant under the pretense of reviewing quarterly reports. Strange, she said, flipping through files. Your son requested copies of the deed for the equipment yard and the downtown office. Said you approved it. I smiled. Did I? She looked uneasy. I thought it was odd. That made two of us. By noon, I'd driven to the yard myself. The gate guard waved like always, but when I pulled my truck into the lot, I noticed something small and sharp on the new signpost. Property of Owens & Sons, LLC. The original company name was Owens Construction, Inc. I founded a corporation. Evan had registered a limited liability company with nearly the same name. One letter difference, but a different entity entirely. I walked through the lot, touching the cool metal of machines I'd bought with 40 years of sweat and missed vacations. The sound of grinding welders came from inside, but the rhythm was off. Workers slower, unsure. Loyalty wavers when leadership shifts overnight. Inside my office, my desk was gone. Not moved, gone, replaced by a glass-top table with a monitor too thin for my liking. The old wooden desk had been my anchor, scarred with decades of blueprints and spilled coffee. I ran my hand along the empty space where it used to be and felt something tighten in my chest. On the shelf above, a framed photo of Evan and me after our first big project was missing. In its place sat a sleek model of a skyscraper, his first independent design. He hadn't just taken control, he'd started rewriting history. That night I drove home slower than usual. The city lights bled into the windshield, blurring red and gold like smeared paint. My mind ticked through possibilities: confrontation, legal challenge, or quiet preparation. I chose the last. Confrontation reveals your hand. Patience builds leverage. The next week I kept showing up as if nothing had changed. I attended meetings, took notes, smiled at clients. Meanwhile, I made copies of everything: contracts, emails, filings, quietly, methodically. Every signature Evan forged, every change he authorized, I documented. One evening, the cleaning crew found me still in the office. "Working late again, Mr. Owens?" the young janitor asked. "Just tying up some loose ends," I said. He nodded politely, unaware that I was cataloging evidence of my own erasure. By the end of that month, I knew the scope. Evan had merged our accounts into his new company, shifted assets under the LLC, and re-registered our major equipment as collateral for a line of credit. Legal, maybe, if I'd signed the authorizations, which I hadn't. Forged digital signatures, subtle but traceable. The realization didn't bring rage. It brought a kind of stillness. The kind you feel before a storm breaks, not fear. Just the awareness that everything's about to change. I poured another drink and looked at the framed photo I kept at home. Evan as a boy, sitting on the hood of the first truck I ever bought. Back then, he used to draw little houses in my notebooks, telling me he'd build things just like Dad. He had built something, it just wasn't honor. So I made a decision. If he wanted the company, he could keep the hollow shell. I'd take back what mattered: the reputation, the relationships, the respect that no signature could steal. But before I could do that, I needed to disappear from his radar. The morning after my decision, I woke before dawn. Old habit. Years of job sites had trained me to measure time by the light creeping through blinds, by the sound of the city trucks warming up. I brewed coffee and opened my notebook, the same kind I'd used since the 80s, thick paper, graph-lined, dependable. Across the top of a clean page, I wrote one word: evidence. For weeks I'd been gathering fragments, emails, contracts, filings. But now the shape of it needed to become visible, something I could touch. Paper doesn't lie the way people do. I began listing what I already knew. Forged signatures on supplier authorizations, duplicate registrations at the county office, asset transfers to Owens & Sons LLC. Each entry got a number and a date. My handwriting stayed steady, measured like drawing lines on blueprints. By the time the sun rose, 10 full pages detailed the dismantling of my own legacy. At 8 sharp, I drove downtown to the courthouse. The clerk recognized me. We'd both grown older, doing the same work in different ways. Property records? She asked. Corporate filings, I said, sliding her the request forms. I need to see anything registered under Owens & Sons LLC filed within the last 6 months. She disappeared into the back. While I waited, a contractor argued at the counter about permit delays. Young, impatient, certain the world owed him speed. I used to sound like that. The clerk returned with a slim stack of printouts. All public record, she said. You can make copies for 50 cents a page. I paid cash. Back in my truck, I read each document carefully. Evan's signature appeared again and again. Electronic certifications, board approvals, notarized transfers. But one page stopped me cold. A resolution stating that David Owens, me, had voluntarily resigned as president and approved the transition. The date matched the week I'd been in Florida visiting my sister. My notary stamp had been scanned, not pressed. Forgery, clean, professional, but still a crime. I didn't slam the steering wheel or shout. Instead, I photographed the document front and back and slipped it into a new folder labeled Fraudulent Executions. That evening, I visited Rick at the yard. He was locking the tool shed when I pulled up. "Evening, boss," he said automatically, then caught himself. "Sorry, habit." "Don't change it," I said. "I'm still your boss, at least until the lawyers say otherwise." He frowned. "Something going on?" "Maybe. Just keep copies of every materials invoice from the last 3 months. Quietly." Rick nodded. No questions. Loyalty built on years of shared sweat doesn't evaporate overnight. Driving home, I realized how strange it felt to operate in shadows inside a company I'd created. Yet the secrecy gave me energy I hadn't felt in years. My mind clicked through contingencies. Forensic accountants, legal channels, trusted clients. Revenge wasn't the goal. Restoration was. But the path to it would require precision. The next step was to secure allies outside Evan's reach. I called Linda Marquez, an attorney I'd worked with on safety liability cases decades earlier. She still picked up her own phone. "David Owens," she said, voice bright. "Haven't heard that name in ages." "Linda, I need quiet advice," I said. "My son refiled our company under a new structure. Possible forgery involved. Can we meet off the record?" Silence, then a measured reply. "Tomorrow, 7 a.m., my office before staff arrives. Bring everything." That night I laid out the evidence on my kitchen table. The papers formed a map of betrayal, filings, account statements, notarized lies. Beside them, a photograph of Evan as a teenager standing next to our first completed house. He'd been beaming, drywall dust on his hair. I remembered telling him that integrity was heavier than concrete. It had to set right or the whole structure would crack. Maybe he'd forgotten, maybe he'd never believed it. Morning brought a gray drizzle. Perfect weather for quiet work. Linda's office smelled of paper and lemon polish. She greeted me with a firm handshake. "Start from the top," she said. I told her everything. Rick's call, the new LLC, the forged resignation. She listened without interruption, making notes in tidy lawyer's shorthand. When I finished, she leaned back. "He's clever, I'll give him that, but not careful enough. Every forged signature, every altered registration leaves a digital trail. We can prove it. Question is, do you want to fight publicly or set a trap privately?" "Privately," I said. "I'm not interested in headlines. I want him to expose himself." She smiled faintly. "Then you'll need patience, and proof that can't be dismissed. I know a forensic document analyst. Discreet. I'll arrange it." I left her office feeling the kind of calm that comes from having a plan. Outside, the rain had stopped. Puddles reflected the courthouse dome, distorted but recognizable, like my life, bent but still standing. Back home, I started creating digital backups. Every file scanned, encrypted, stored in 3 separate drives. For the first time in weeks, I felt control returning. Evan might have stolen the company's name, but I still owned the craft, the relationships, the truth. And truth, when documented correctly, can be weaponized. That weekend I attended the annual Builders Banquet, a networking event Evan hadn't bothered to attend yet. Old clients and colleagues shook my hand, asked about retirement. I told them the company was restructuring. Subtle words, planting seeds. In business, perception is cement. Once it sets, it's hard to break. By Sunday night, Linda called. My analyst confirmed the forgeries, she said. The timestamps and metadata don't match your notarization history, it's airtight. Good, I said. Now we wait. Wait for what? For him to think he's safe enough to make his next move. That's when we'll take back what can't be bought. After hanging up, I poured a single glass of bourbon and watched the rain return. Each droplet struck the window like a small countdown. Somewhere across town, my son probably celebrated his new title, his new freedom. Let him. I wasn't finished building yet. By the time the leaves started turning, the files in my study had outgrown their drawer. They filled a banker's box now. Paper testimony that a lifetime of trust could be itemized. I had the signatures, the filings, the timestamps. What I didn't have was a moment to look my son in the eye and see what he'd become. I picked a neutral setting, a diner we'd used to stop at when jobs ran long. Nothing formal, just coffee and eggs and quiet. I called him myself, used the same even tone I'd use with a supplier. Evan, we need to talk about the company. Tomorrow, 7 a.m., Riverfront Diner. He hesitated only a second. Sure thing, Dad. I arrived early as always. The place smelled of bacon grease and burnt toast, just like it used to. The same waitress recognized me, poured coffee without asking. When Evan came through the door, the cold air followed him in. He looked confident, new jacket, pressed shirt, but his eyes carried that quick flicker of calculation I'd learned to read in boardrooms. Morning, he said, sliding into the booth. Morning. Small talk first. Weather, sports, construction permits. Then I placed an envelope on the table between us. His gaze dropped to it, then back to me. What's that? Copies of recent filings, I said. Corporate changes, bank authorizations, my supposed resignation letter. He kept his expression neutral, but his fingers tightened on the coffee mug. Where'd you get those? Public records, hardly a secret. He leaned back, forced a smile. Look, Dad, the company needed restructuring. You were talking retirement. I just moved things along. You forged my signature to do it. That broke the smile. He didn't flinch. Evan had always been good at stillness, but the color drained from his cheeks. That's a serious accusation. It's not an accusation, I said softly. It's a statement of fact. I had a forensic analyst verify it. He opened his mouth, closed it, then found his footing. Even if that were true, the company's stronger now. We've got investors, new contracts, a growth plan, things you never would have risked. That may be, I said, but risk without integrity is just gambling. For a moment, the noise of the diner filled the silence between us. Silverware clinking, a radio murmuring old rock songs. I watched him stir his coffee just to have something to do with his hands. What do you want? He finally asked. I want you to understand how this ends, I said. I'm not suing you, not yet. I'm giving you a chance to fix what you broke. His laugh was short and sharp. Fix it? Dad, you don't get it. I am the company now. Clients talk to me, banks talk to me. You walk away with your retirement and your name on a plaque. Everyone wins. I let him finish. Then I pushed another envelope across the table. You might want to open that before declaring victory. He hesitated, then tore it open. Inside were copies of client letters, 3 of our largest accounts, each confirming that all future contracts would be handled through my personal consultancy. Their signatures were fresh. His eyes moved quickly across the pages, and for the first time he looked uncertain. "You went around me," he said. "No," I replied. "I went back to the people who built this company with me. I told them the truth, that my son's enthusiasm outpaced his ethics. They prefer working with people whose names mean something." He set the papers down carefully. "You can't take the clients. The contracts are with the LLC. Those particular projects are bound by personal service clauses. They hired me, not a logo." For a long time he didn't speak. The waitress came by, refilled cups, retreated. When he finally met my eyes again, there was a trace of something I hadn't seen since he was a boy, fear of disappointing me. But it passed quickly. "So what now?" he said. "Now I wait," I said. "I've documented everything. The forgeries, the asset transfers, the false filings. When the bank audits your line of credit and it'll lead straight to those documents. You'll be asked to explain them. That's when you decide whether to undo the damage or watch it unravel in court." He shook his head slowly. "You'd ruin your own son over paperwork." I finished my coffee, set the cup down. "I'm not ruining you, Evan. You did that when you turned trust into collateral." He didn't have an answer for that. The silence stretched long enough for the waitress to drop the check. I left at 20 and stood. "You have until the end of the month," I said. After that, I stopped waiting. When I reached the door, he called after me. "You taught me to fight for what's mine." I turned just enough to meet his eyes. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Outside, the morning had turned cold and clear. Steam rose from manhole covers. The Ohio River carried its slow, gray current. I stood there for a moment, breathing in the city I'd helped build, the one he was trying to claim as his own. The confrontation hadn't given me satisfaction, only confirmation. Evan thought this was a skirmish over money or ownership. He still didn't understand that what he'd stolen wasn't the company, it was the story of who we were, and that story was still mine to finish. Back in the truck, I opened my notebook and drew a single line under the word evidence. Below it I wrote, Phase 2, prepare exit and exposure. The quiet revenge wasn't about destruction. It was about design. Like any structure, it would need the right foundation. I started the engine and drove toward the yard, already thinking 3 moves ahead. The morning after the diner meeting, I sat in my truck outside the old yard and watched the crew roll in. The sound of diesel engines used to feel like victory to me. Now it just reminded me how quickly noise can replace substance. Inside, everything looked the same on the surface, same machines, same men. But there was a new stiffness in the way people moved. They greeted me politely, careful, like anyone caught between 2 bosses. I didn't blame them. Evan had made sure loyalty felt risky. I walked the perimeter once, checked the equipment tags that now read Owens & Sons LLC, and kept my hands in my pockets so no one would see them tighten into fists. When I got back in the truck, I didn't look back. The yard no longer belonged to me, but the craft did, and craft travels with the craftsman. That afternoon, I called Rick. "Ever think about starting fresh?" I asked. He hesitated. "Fresh how?" "New outfit, smaller, cleaner, no borrowed money, just honest work and people who still sleep at night." There was a pause, then a quiet, "You tell me where to sign." Within a week, I rented a 1-room office near the river. Peeling paint, bad lighting, cheap rent. Perfect. I ordered a new business license under my own name, David Owens Construction Consulting. No sons, no ampersands, no illusions. The first few days felt like moving into an old house you'd built yourself. Every creak familiar, every corner reminding you what mattered. I spent the hours drafting letters to former clients. Handwritten, not mass emailed. I thanked them for past partnerships and mentioned casually that I was offering direct consulting again. By the end of the week, 3 responded. By the end of the month, 7. I kept my hours long and my head down. Every project I accepted was one Evan couldn't handle. Repair audits, city compliance checks, historical restorations, work that required patience more than profit. Each invoice was honest, modest, documented. I wanted a paper trail that could stand against anything he'd filed. Meanwhile, Linda kept me updated. "Your son's loan portfolio is wobbling," she said over the phone one evening. "He leveraged company assets as collateral. When those clients moved to you, the bank noticed." I didn't gloat. "Let it wobble," I said. "Buildings fall when foundations shift." She chuckled softly. "You always did speak in blueprints." Around that time, rumors started reaching me through suppliers. Evan was pushing harder, underbidding jobs, promising impossible deadlines. It's the oldest sign of panic in construction, trying to outrun a crack instead of fixing it. I never interfered, I just worked quietly and visibly. Every successful inspection, every satisfied client added weight to my reputation and subtracted it from his. The city inspectors started calling me directly again, asking informal opinions. That kind of credibility can't be forged. Late one Friday, I stopped by Rick's place. He'd set up the new yard on a patch of leased gravel behind an auto shop. 2 trucks, 1 excavator, a portable trailer for an office. It looked small but solid. "Not much yet," he said. "It's enough," I told him. "Everything big starts as a line on paper." We stood there watching the sunset bounce off the machines. For the first time in months, I felt calm. The following week, Linda invited me to her office. "We've got an opportunity," she said. She slid a document across the table, a letter from the state licensing board. "Your son filed to renew the contractor's license under the new company. The board flagged inconsistencies in the signatures. They're requesting clarification from the original license holder, you." I read the letter twice, then looked at her. "So they're asking me to confirm authenticity?" "Exactly. You confirm what's true quietly. The board handles the rest." The process took a month. I submitted notarized statements, copies of verified signatures, and the analyst's report Linda had arranged earlier. No accusations, no drama, just facts. The board suspended Owens & Sons LLC pending review. Evan called once, left a voicemail. "We need to talk." I didn't answer. Business has a way of spreading news faster than gossip. Within days, suppliers shifted their credit lines back to me, and clients postponed payments to his company until the situation cleared. I hadn't lifted a finger against him, only removed the illusions that protected him. One evening, Rick dropped by with takeout and a grin that looked half guilty. "He's been calling everyone," he said. "Says you're sabotaging him." "I'm not," I said. "I'm just building again. The truth's doing the rest." By winter, the small office was thriving. We'd picked up 2 restoration contracts downtown, steady, respectable work. I spent my evenings at the drafting table, pencil in hand, rediscovering the rhythm that had first made me love this trade. Somewhere between lines and measurements, anger gave way to clarity. I realized the rebuild wasn't just about work, it was about identity, my name on a door again, not as ornament but as guarantee. Still, I kept one eye on the inevitable. Evan's silence stretched for weeks, which meant he was scheming. Quiet doesn't always mean peace. Sometimes it's the sound of someone digging. I was ready when Linda called. "The board reached a decision," she said. "License suspended indefinitely pending investigation. They're forwarding documentation to the state attorney's office. Fraud charges possible." I exhaled slowly. "And my status?" "Clean. Confirmed as original holder. They even thanked you for cooperating." I stared at the wall for a long moment before answering. Then that's that. Maybe not, she said. If he reaches out again, think before you pick up. Desperate people don't call for closure. They call for leverage. After we hung up, I turned off the desk lamp and sat in the dim light. The office smelled of sawdust and fresh coffee. Outside, snow had started to fall soft against the window pane. Evan might still have thought this was about punishment. It wasn't. The rebuild had taught me something deeper, that the things worth keeping, skill, reputation, honesty, can't be stolen, only surrendered. And I wasn't surrendering anything else. The notice came on a Monday, a short email from Linda. State Attorney's Office has filed formal fraud charges, press release scheduled for noon. I read it twice, folded my glasses and set them on the desk. Outside, the first thaw of spring was turning the street to mirror, wet asphalt reflecting gray sky. 40 years of work had once built a company that bore my name. Now my son's version of it would vanish in a single paragraph of legal language. At 11:50, I poured a cup of coffee and opened the local business feed. The headline arrived on schedule. Owens & Sons, LLC under investigation for forged licensing and financial misrepresentation. It was written in the dry tone reporters use when they know the story will grow. The article quoted the licensing board, the Attorney General's office, and even included a statement from one of the banks. We are cooperating fully with investigators. Evan's name appeared halfway down the page, acting president, followed by that familiar phrase, decline to comment. By afternoon, the phone started buzzing. Old contacts, colleagues, suppliers. Some wanted details, others just wanted to distance themselves. I answered none of them. Silence was my insulation. Rick stopped by after work, still wearing his safety vest. It's everywhere, he said, setting his phone on my desk. News sites, trade boards, even LinkedIn. I nodded. It'll burn through quick. Then it'll smolder for years. He studied me. You all right? I'm fine, I said, just watching the wind blow the dust where it belongs. By Wednesday, the fallout began in earnest. The bank froze the LLC's accounts. The insurance carrier withdrew coverage. Subcontractors walked off job sites, refusing to work without payment guarantees. Each withdrawal was another brick pulled from the wall he'd built. Linda kept me informed but never dramatized. They'll probably settle for restitution and license revocation, she said. First offense, but with documented intent. That's enough, I replied. He'll live just differently. A week later, I drove past the old yard. The sign was gone, just bolt holes where it had been. Equipment stood idle, paint fading in the early sun. A single chain looped through the gate, padlocked. Through the fence, I could see the trailer that had once been my office. The blinds were open. Paperwork covered the desk like snowdrifts. Abandonment has a sound, hollow, metallic, final. 2 days after that, an industry newsletter ran a short piece. Owens & Sons LLC ceases operations following fraud case. Former founder launches consulting firm. They'd written former founder, which made no grammatical sense, but the phrase pleased me anyway. It meant the distinction was public now. Clients started calling, not out of pity but practicality. We'd like you to audit what your son built, one developer said. Another wanted me to oversee a remediation project on a half-finished site. I agreed to both. Every hour I billed was one more line in the ledger of repair. The only thing I didn't expect was the quiet. No phone call from Evan, no letter, no confrontation, just absence. I wondered whether silence was his pride or his punishment. Maybe both. Toward the end of April, Linda forwarded the final court summary. Plea agreement accepted, restitution ordered, professional license revoked for 10 years. She added a note. Case closed. Congratulations, David. I didn't feel victorious. just done. That night I walked down to the river. The water was high, cold, moving fast under the bridge lights. I watched driftwood spin in slow circles before the current carried it away. Businesses like rivers don't stop. They just change channels when one path silts over. Back at the office, I pinned the IU newspaper clipping to a corkboard, not as a trophy but as a reminder. Underneath it, I tacked a fresh sheet of paper and wrote in block letters, "Next project." The rebuild was complete. The exposure had done its work, and the world, indifferent as concrete, kept turning. By summer, the phones at the new office no longer startled me. They rang for ordinary reasons again: estimates, bids, routine follow-ups. Work had settled into rhythm, the kind that makes a man forget to count the days. Most mornings I still arrived before anyone else. I liked unlocking the door, hearing the echo in the hallway before machines started humming. The smell of sawdust and hot coffee mixed the way it always had, a scent I'd once thought I'd lost. Rick managed the crews now, and 2 apprentices shadowed him. They were both in their 20s, green but hungry. The first, Miguel, carried a notebook everywhere, drawing diagrams between tasks. The second, Leah, had a mechanic's precision: measure once, cut right the first time. Watching them reminded me of the years when Evan used to ride along to job sites, knees knocking against the glove compartment, asking why beams needed bracing. I tried not to compare, but memory doesn't take orders. Instead, I taught. Slowly, carefully. How to read load paths, how to write bids that were honest and still profitable, how to walk a client through a blueprint so they felt ownership instead of confusion. Build trust before you build walls, I told them. They laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. By August, word of our integrity began to spread. Small contracts led to larger ones: renovations, city projects, a historic warehouse conversion near the river. The jobs didn't make headlines, but they paid the bills, and more important, they paid respect. Linda dropped by one afternoon to deliver paperwork for closing out the last traces of the old company. "Everything's finalized," she said. "No more Owens & Sons LLC in the state registry." I signed the confirmation, handed her a check for her services, and realized that for the first time in a year, my name alone filled every line of a document. "You planning to expand again?" she asked. "Maybe," I said. "But slower this time, quality over quantity." She smiled. "You've earned calm." When she left, I stood by the window overlooking the river. Barges moved beneath the bridge, hauling gravel, steel, everything a city needs to keep standing. They looked small from up here, but I knew how much weight each carried. That fall, the apprenticeship board invited me to speak at the local trade school. I hadn't lectured in decades. The classroom smelled of plaster dust and ambition. I talked about honest contracts, about learning every trade you manage, about leaving a structure better than you found it. Near the end, a student asked what single lesson mattered most. "Don't build anything you're not willing to stand under," I said. The room went quiet. Maybe they understood, maybe they didn't yet. They would someday. Afterward, Miguel and Leah asked if they could start a side project under my supervision, a community center renovation the city had neglected. I agreed on one condition: every invoice had to be transparent, every decision teachable. They kept their word. Watching them balance numbers and ethics felt better than any award I'd ever received. When the project finished, the mayor's office sent a thank you letter. It hung on the wall beside the framed photo of our crew, not as pride, but as proof that good work still mattered. By December, the office had grown to 5 employees. We were comfortable, not wealthy, and that was fine. I'd learned that money stabilizes a life. It doesn't define it. What defines it are the people who trust you with their ceilings, their walls, their hopes that something solid can still be built in a shaky world. Sometimes late in the evening I'd lock up alone and stand in the quiet. The hum of the heater, the faint tick of cooling metal, it all sounded like forgiveness. Not the sentimental kind, but the practical version. The kind that comes from doing your job right day after day until regret has nothing left to cling to. The rebuild had become redemption not because I won, but because I worked. Work has always been my language. One night, Miguel stayed late finishing plans. "Mr. Owens," he said, "how do you know when you've built enough?" "You don't," I told him. "You just know when what you've built can stand without you." He nodded, thoughtful. When I drove home, the skyline glowed orange against the dark, cranes still moving, proof that the city, like people, never really stops building. Winter lifted slow that year. The river thawed in strips of silver and the city sounded different. Lighter somehow, as if all the hammering and grinding carried a new rhythm. My own days had taken on a gentler pace. I still rose before dawn, but mostly out of habit, not obligation. The business could run without me now, and that was the truest proof that I'd built it right this time. On the first clear morning of March, I stopped by the job site on Elm Street. The new community center was almost finished. Our apprentices project turned city contract. Miguel and Leah stood out front with clipboards, arguing cheerfully over window alignment. Rick leaned against the truck, pretending not to smile. "Morning, boss," he said. "Not for long," I answered. They laughed, thinking I was joking, but I meant it. Watching them move through the site, calling out orders with confidence I'd once had to lend them, I felt a quiet certainty. They no longer needed my shadow. Every correction I might have given, they were already giving each other. The rhythm of the place matched the one that had pulsed through my company decades ago before greed and pride turned it sour. Now it was whole again, just under a different name. Inside, sunlight spilled across the fresh drywall, warming the air still heavy with plaster dust. Miguel held up a blueprint. "We decided to shift the ramp 3 feet, he said. "Makes the entrance more accessible." "Good call," I said. "Clients notice when you think of everyone." Leah joined in. "The mayor's office wants you at the ribbon cutting next month." "I'll be there," I said, "but stand up front. It's your project." They exchanged quick smiles, half pride, half disbelief, and went back to work. I lingered a moment longer, then stepped outside. The air smelled of sawdust and thawing earth, a combination I'd always loved. It meant beginnings. Back at the office, I packed slowly. The desk drawers held more dust than papers now. I kept one framed photograph, the first crew I ever led, all of us young and sunburned, squinting into the camera. The rest I left for Miguel and Leah to fill with their own memories. That evening, Rick stopped by. "You really gonna step back?" he asked. "Someone's got to make sure the fishing spots haven't moved," I said. He chuckled, then grew serious. "You know, not many bosses leave a place better than they found it." "Maybe that's the only way to leave," I said. When he left, I turned off the lights one last time. The glow from the street lamps slanted through the blinds, tracing gold lines across the floor. For a moment, I saw every phase of my life layered in that room. The young man sketching his first blueprint, the father teaching his son, the older man rebuilding from ruin. The shapes overlapped, then faded into one quiet truth. Work ends, but what it builds keeps standing. A week later, the ribbon cutting drew a small crowd. The mayor spoke, the cameras flashed, children chased each other across the new playground. When they called my name, I kept it brief. "This building isn't mine," I said. "It belongs to the people who'll use it and the hands that raised it. I just had the privilege of teaching a few of those hands what steady work looks like." Applause rolled through the cold air, warm and genuine. I stepped aside, let Miguel and Leah take the front. The cameras found them easily. They shone in that light better than I ever could now. After the ceremony, Miguel handed me the scissors. "Keep these," he said, "for the next ribbon." I smiled. "No, you'll need them more." As the crowd dispersed, I walked down to the river's edge. The water moved slow and certain, carrying bits of ice south. I thought about everything that had come and gone, my company, my name on buildings, even the weight of betrayal, and realized none of it mattered as much as this. The work was continuing, honest and solid, under younger hands. When the sun slipped behind the bridge, I headed home. The truck's radio crackled between stations the same way it always had. I didn't mind. Some noises, like memory, you learn to keep. That night before bed, I opened my old notebook. The last page was blank. I wrote a single line. "Legacy isn't ownership, it's endurance." Then I closed the book and slept soundly for the first time in years. If this story stayed with you, take a second to hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And tell me in the comments, what did this story make you think about? Legacy, forgiveness, or starting over? I read every message, and your stories inspire the next ones we tell here.